Welcome back, friends. So today we are going to see about dynamic data masking. We would understand what is dynamic data masking, when it should be used, and then we would see some demo. So let us first understand what is dynamic data masking. Dynamic data masking limits sensitive data exposure by masking it into non-privileged users. Right. So dynamic data masking helps prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data by enabling customer to specify how much sensitive data to reveal with minimal impact on the application layer. Okay, so there are a lot of methods, generally it is at many times, it is necessary that we need to hide some of the personal nature data or financials data from an unauthorized users, right? Nobody, like everybody cannot see all this data. And that's where, since in legacy application also this were done by writing some code or, by manipulating some code. But Microsoft has came up with this feature called as dynamic data masking, which is basically very easy to use. Why this dynamic data masking? Because if you are using the dynamic data masking, right, then you don't have to change anything in your existing applications, since masking rules are applied in the query results and not, no data is like, for example, no data is changed at source. The masking functions are applied onto the query results, and hence it is very easy to use without any changes to an existing application. Got the point? Okay. So, the today's agenda, as I told you, would be dynamic data masking, and then we would see some practical demo also. Dynamic data masking was, introduced from version 2.16 and later. It is also available on Azure SQL, Azure SQL Managed Instance, and Azure Synapse Analytics. Okay, it helps prevent, as we already discussed, it helps prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data to non-privileged users, can be configured on designated database columns or fields, right? So it can be configured on a designated database. So now it's not that, you will have to configure this on an instance. You can configure on a specific database, and that too on a specific columns of a tables. You don't have to do anything you on a whole table. Right, you can select specific columns. Can be implemented on existing application database without modifying the existing queries. So this is very important, right? Because if we had to do some background changes or application changes or code changes, then it becomes rather very difficult to implement such features. Sorry, right? So this was a very important point. Next is, okay, dynamic data masking contains basically four functions, right? A default, a email, a random, and a custom string. Default is, right, full masking according to the data types of the column. So, if you go by default, then it would actually do full masking as per the data types of the columns, whether it is a varchar and varchar, numeric, decimal, and so on. In email, if you are using the email function, then first letter of an email address, it masks, it shows the first letter of the email address and mask with a constant suffix and then .com. So for example, there is an email address called, jitendra@gmail.com. Then it will show a j, then a constant suffix and .com. Okay. Random, a random masking function to use. Generally, this is used for an numeric type of data. And custom string method that exposes the first and last letters. Right? This in this custom string, it exposes the first and last letters and adds a custom padding in between. Right? So it exposes only the first and last letters and then a custom padding. Okay. So these are four functions. For dynamic data masking, anybody want to implement dynamic data masking, then he or she should have an alter any mask and alter permission on a table if you want to configure the dynamic data masking. Okay, then there are some best practices. So what are some best practices for dynamic data masking? In if you have implemented dynamic data masking, right? Users can still update the data on mask column with the proper permission, right? So if user have some proper permission, then he or she can still update the data. So see, in the beginning itself, we saw, we actually discussed that no underlying data gets changed or anonymized, right? Basically, these functions are applied on the final output of the query results, right? So user can still update the data. If you are using select into and insert into, then the newer table which is created creates with a masked data, okay, into another table. And dynamic data masking is also is applied on during the import and export of the table. If you are importing or exporting the table, then if the dynamic data masking is actually created or configured, then the same would get applied onto the import and export of the data. There are some limitations and restrictions, for using the dynamic data masking or configuration. Very first is if you have enabled encrypted, always encrypted on a column, right? So if your column is encrypted by always encrypted, then this dynamic data masking would not be configured. You will not be able to use dynamic data masking on that column. If you enable the file stream, also cannot be configured on a computed column. So you cannot, dynamic data masking cannot be configured on a computed column. But yes, if the computed column depends on a column with a mask, then the computed column will return the mask data. So basically, on computed column you cannot. But if that column is dependent on any mask column, then the computed column which would be generated will be of the mask, will be having a mask, right? A column in a polybase external table, you cannot configure on that also. Dynamic data management is implemented as a schema change on the underlying table, right? So it is we are not changing the data, but some type of schema is getting changed and therefore cannot be performed on a column with dependencies, right? So for example, if you have, sorry, if you, for example, if you have the table on which index is present, and if index is, that index is referring that column, then in that case, you cannot configure the dynamic data masking. In that case, what you need to do is that first remove the dependency. So remove the index, change, apply the dynamic data masking, and again recreate the index. In that way you can do. But if the index is already present, then you cannot uh, actually configure the dynamic data masking, right? So this was a very brief some part of a theory. As usual, I generally don't like to go much in detail into theory. So let us see something in action. Let me open my management studio. Yes, right. So as you can see, I have created this create database dynamic data masking, right? I'm creating one table into that and inserting some record into this. Let us see how this what are inserted. So you can see there are some 4 to 5 columns: a first name, date of birth, employee salary, and employee email, right? And then I'm creating one user without login, just for this demo purpose, and I'm granting a select on that table to that user. Okay. Now I am using that user, I'm firing a select query as a DDM user. So let us see first of all, without any function, how does this looks? Okay. So currently DDM user has the select permission, and if you can see, he can actually see all the data, right? All the data, all the columns is visible and nothing is masked. So now let us do a masking first as the default function. As we saw that there are 4 functions, so let us see default function. So what we need to do, and as we have already discussed, that this is a schema change. So how we mask this: alter table, a table name, and then alter column, right? And which column? So I'm masking this employee first name column, this column, with mask with function default. Okay. So we have created this mask on this, and now let us see how this DDM user will look at data for him. Can you see, as we discussed, for default everything is masked. Okay. So here if you can see, now for DDM user he cannot see anything. Okay. But for normal user, as we say, as we have discussed, that data is not going to change, only the query results are changing. So data is intact, data would be as it is. So if any normal user which have proper permission, if he fires the select query on this table, then he or she would able to see everything. Okay. So this was the default function. Now let us see email function. Again, the syntax would be same, alter table, a table name, alter column, and this time we are actually masking this employee email and mask with a email function. Let us check how DDM user, data would look like for DDM user. See, so first character would be visible, then a constant suffix, and then .com, right? So only first character, otherwise everything is masked. Okay. Now let us see a random function. Okay, so random, as we saw that basically it is used for a integer or decimal type. And what does this do? So random one nines means it would create a single number from 0 to 9, any single number for employee salary. And the syntax remains the change same. So let us see. Okay, and now let us see how data looks for DDM user. See, now we have used already three function, and you can see employee salary is not visible, and only single integer value is generated from 0 to 9. Okay, and the last one is partial. We saw. So what here we are saying, this is the function. We are again, we are overriding this default function, and we are saying, okay, please mask my employee first name with partial function. Partial means now 3xx3, right? What does means that means that first three characters would be visible, in between everything would be masked, and the last three characters would be visible, right? And let us see how does this looks. Okay. Now, can you see there are some records which are fully XXX, which means now when this happens, so if you want to see this way, then you can see Kintesh. So, the character should be that long, more than six, because first three and last three would be visible, and in between it would be masked. But if the length of the column, the value in that column is not like big six character big enough, then everything would be masked. So, for example, these three records, right? It was not having the value more than six characters or six letters, and hence everything is being masked. But wherever the value is possible, right, it is showing for example in row 2 you can see KIN, XXX and ESH. Okay, right? So this way, these are the four function which is very useful, right? And this is the main purpose or the main reason to use is that you don't have to change anything underline or there are no code changes. Okay. Now there are two catalog tables called as sys.mask columns and sys.tables. With the help of these catalog tables, you can identify which are the columns that are masked. So you can see that on my employee table, this is the table name, then a column name, whether it is mask or not, it's a bit column, and then it will also show a function. So currently, as because we overrided default for the employee first name with a partial, right? So the last changes, it will show the last changes has been done, right? And with the help of this catalog table, you can identify. So if you have a very big application or a very big database, then you can actually fire this statement with the help of this sysmask column. You can identify that across your database how many tables are there which have this masked columns. Okay. So as and when we mask the thing, we can also unmask. So when I fire grant unmask on DDM user, and then if I actually fire this statement, then again he can see everything back. Right now nothing is masked because I have I have actually unmasked him. Okay, similarly, whatever you have granted, you can revoke that. So with the help of this revoke unmask on DDM user, if you revoke the same permission, and now if you again execute this, then you can see he can know all these functions. See, functions are there. We are just removing and granting this privileges like mask and unmask. Okay. Otherwise, function still remains. Hence, as soon as you revoke that unmask, again he would not able to see anything. Okay. If you want to now, if you want to remove the mask itself, right? So currently, if you can see here, on this table, you can see employee first name, employee salary, and employee email have the mask function. Now what I'm doing, I'm dropping this mask function from my table uh, and on my column. Okay, so the syntax is alter table, table name, alter column, employee first name, and then drop mask. So when I fire this statement, and then if I use this statement for DDM user, you can see now first name is visible to him, because what we have done is we have actually removed the mask function from this column. And here again, if you fire this query, then you can see now only you can see two columns with a function, right? So this was a very small demo for dynamic data masking. Hope you have enjoyed this and you have understood this. Okay, so you can, you can try it out yourself. This is very easy and nothing much, you have to do. You don't have to change any code, as I keep repeating this, right? So this can be, achieved very, very quickly and very easily. Okay, so that's it, guys, for today. And if you like this, please subscribe to my channel and share as much as possible. Meet you with the next good topic next time. And till then, bye. Take care.